This is not a Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. It sure does look like one, but it's actually the all-new Bear 650. And there's a pretty cool story behind its creation. I'm here in a very hot California for a little sneak peek, and I'm going to tell you what's different, what new features it offers, and take it for a world-first test ride in the mountains around Palm Springs. So, let's get to it.
The Bear is the latest model to join the popular 650 Twins platform after the Interceptor, the Continental GT, the Super Meteor and the Shotgun. The new bike is based heavily on the Interceptor, but it adds a bunch of new components to give it more of a classic Scrambler look in a similar vein to the Triumph Scrambler and the Ducati Scrambler. The idea for a Royal Enfield 650 Scrambler has long been on the cards, but it was the story of a lesser-known off-road hero that sparked the Bear's development. In 1960, young Eddie Mulder from Lancaster, California lined up in the famous Big Bear Run Desert Race on a Royal Enfield 500 single. And despite missing the start, breaking a foot peg and losing a shock, the 16-year-old overcame the odds to win the grueling race outright. Mulder went on to have a successful career as a racer and as a stuntman, most notably with Clint Eastwood in Magnum Force. Now, 64 years after his famous win, Royal Enfield has built the Bear in his honour. At the time we made this video, Australian pricing and availability were yet to be revealed, but expected to be priced a little above the Interceptor. In the meantime, here's everything you need to know.
The Bear 650 is quite clearly based on the Interceptor architecture, but it is a new bike. In fact, Royal Enfield tells us that it's more than 2/3 new. Of course, it's the same engine, the same fuel tank, and mostly the same frame, but the rest is all new.
New components include shower upside-down suspension with increased travel, a kicked-up rear, a 2-into-1 exhaust, and chunky dual sport rubber designed specifically for this model by MRF. The Bear also gets a bigger rear brake disc compared to the Interceptor, as well as repositioned handlebar and foot pegs to give it more of an aggressive Scrambler stance.
Meanwhile, the engine is the exact same unit as the other 650 twin models. Not surprising, but what is surprising is that thanks to this new exhaust, torque has actually been increased slightly.
The Bear's engine gets an additional 4 Nm of torque, however Royal Enfield said it opted not to increase horsepower to maintain the bike's learner credentials.
The Bear 650 also does come with a few new tricks in the tech department. For starters, there's all new LED lighting, which apparently is a first for the 650 platform. And there's also this Super Trick TFT display, which is adopted from the Himalayan and Gorilla models.
The Tripper TFT display is a great addition, and with smartphone connectivity you can access phone calls, music and full colour navigation. It's a good system, but one small problem is that the switchgear can be a little bit fiddly. Elsewhere, it's a simple affair, much like the desert sleds Eddie Mulder would have ridden back in the day, although ABS can be turned off at the rear with a bar-mounted button.
I really love what Royal Enfield has done with this model. They've taken an unsung hero and shone a light on his incredible story with a dedicated model. And I really love the classic desert sled style of this bike. But that's enough talking, let's go gear up and hit the road.
To put the Bear through its paces, we headed into the San Jacinto Mountains above the Coachella Valley, and it proved to be the perfect testing grounds for this all-new Scrambler.
Well, this is what it's all about. We're in California, we're on a Scrambler motorcycle, the sun's shining. This is motorcycling at its very best.
And yes, the Bear does indeed seek to capture the pioneering spirit of those early desert races with a simple, user-friendly and pure motorcycling experience. It might be based on the Interceptor, but it does a great job of telling its own unique story.
The first thing that comes to mind on the Bear 650 is that it feels a lot like the Interceptor, but the torque increase is noticeable. It's only a small increase, but it's just enough to make the bike feel a little bit more lively, a little bit more muscular, and I really like it.
That said, the Bear is still a LAMS approved 650, and while the bottom end and mid-range should satisfy most riders, the top end may bother faster riders when the road opens up. But honestly, I'm clutching at straws now because that is really my only gripe when it comes to the bike's performance. And while the Bear is most definitely not an off-road machine, it's more than capable enough on simple dirt roads, and that's made possible by the upgraded suspension.
You know, my philosophy with suspension's always been that if you don't notice it, it's doing its job, and that's the case with this bike. Royal Enfield said they put a lot of work into the shower upside down fork, and I think they've done an incredible job.
The bike feels really balanced front to rear, it tips in and out of corners really easily, and it is never fazed by potholes or bumps. I do really enjoy the ride position on this bike too. It's nice and comfortable, you've got a comfy flat seat, the motor style handlebar and the foot pegs are in a good position, and it's just got that nice upright Scrambler ride position, and I really enjoy it. Overall, the Bear is a great example of an affordable, capable, easy to ride and learner friendly package. But perhaps the most impressive thing about this bike is the story it tells. Resurrecting the story of Eddie Mulder for a modern audience gives this machine spirit, substance and soul, areas that Enfield excels in, but ones that sadly many other manufacturers often overlook. The Bear might be a relatively simple machine, not all that far removed from the desert sleds of old, but it means a lot more than the sum of its parts. It gets down to the core of motorcycling, fun, freedom and having a go, and that's why it's a winner. Thumbs up Royal Enfield.